This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Calls are growing in South Carolina to remove the Confederate battle flag at the state capitol after last week's mass shooting of 9 African-American worshipers at the historic Emmanuel AME Church. The flag has been the source of controversy for decades in South Carolina, but a growing number of politicians are calling for its removal after photos were published online showing the accused gunman, Dylan Roof, posing with the flag. On Monday, South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley called on lawmakers to take down the flag at the state capitol grounds.
For many people in our state, the flag stands for traditions that are noble. Traditions of history, of heritage, and of ancestry. The hate-filled murderer who massacred our brothers and sisters in Charleston has a sick and twisted view of the flag. In no way does he reflect the people in our state who respect and in many ways revere it. Those South Carolinians view the flag as a symbol of respect, integrity, and duty. They also see it as a memorial. That flag, while an integral part of our past, does not represent the future of our great state. The murderer, now locked up in Charleston, said he hoped his actions would start a race war. We have an opportunity to show that not only was he wrong, but that just the opposite is happening. My hope is that by removing a symbol that divides us, we can move forward as a state in harmony, and we can honor the 9 blessed souls who are now in heaven.
South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley called on state lawmakers to address the issue over the summer and said she would order a special session if they did not. Debate over the flag goes back decades. South Carolina raised the flag over the State House in the early 60s at the height of the civil rights movement, 100 years after the Civil War. The flag was moved to its current location on a lower flagpole on the Capitol grounds in 2000 when the NAACP launched a tourism boycott of the state. Last week, NAACP President Cornell William Brooks described the flag as an emblem of hate.
Some will assert that the Confederate flag is merely a symbol of years gone by, a symbol of heritage and not hate. But where we see that symbol lifted up as an emblem of hate, as a tool of hate, as an inspiration for hate, as an inspiration for violence, that symbol has to come down. That symbol must be removed from our state capitol.
While South Carolina has been the focus of attention this week for flying the Confederate battle flag on the grounds of the state capitol, 7 official state flags in the South still contain imagery from the Confederate flag. Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Tennessee. To talk more about the controversy, we're joined by a number of guests. From Columbia, South Carolina State Representative Gary Clary and Don Doyle, professor of American history at the University of South Carolina. In Raleigh, North Carolina, Reverend Dr. William Barber joins us, president of the North Carolina NAACP. But we begin with Republican South Carolina State Representative Doug Brannon, who has announced plans to sponsor legislation to take down the Confederate flag from the front of the state capitol. Brannon was a friend of the late state senator, Reverend Clementa Pinckney, who was killed in last week's church massacre. State Representative Brannon joins us via Democracy Now! Video stream from Spartanburg, South Carolina, from the district he represents. Welcome to Democracy Now! We're going to begin with you, Republican South Carolina State Representative Doug Brannon. Tell us about your decision to introduce legislation to bring down that flag.
Woke up last Thursday morning, to the news of the death of these 9 wonderful people. I felt something had to be done then. It took a few hours to figure out exactly but what really prompted my desire to file the bill was when I saw the photos of the front of that automobile and the photos of the T-shirt, and then later in the day of that shooter carrying a flag. Clementa Pinckney deserves this. Those 9 people deserve this. Our state capitol needs to be free of the flag.
How long have you been in office?
5 years.
Had you ever had a desire to do this before? Had you ever spoken with Clem Pinckney about his desire to have this removed?
No, Senator Pinckney and I had not talked about the flag specifically. We did talk about other issues, and we talked about judicial candidates and those types of conversations, aside from just friendly conversations. But he and I never talked specifically about the flag, no. I think your other question was, had I ever thought about it before? And as I've said to others, no, and I apologize for that. I should have done it 5 years ago. That's what public officials are supposed to do, is the right thing. I didn't do it, and for that I apologize.
What was your reaction to seeing Governor Nikki Haley say for the first time that it should come down?
Pure joy. But it wasn't. I'm thankful for the governor's remarks and demands, but to see those standing near her, Senator Graham, Senator Scott, members of both bodies, the House and the Senate, the movement, the current has picked up. It's moving quickly, and I believe the votes are there.
Do you believe you could lose your next election for introducing this legislation?
Well, I've been up since 4:30 this morning. I was watching the local news in Spartanburg, and they were conducting a poll. And if it's accurate, I will lose, because it was about 70-30 in favor of leaving the flag on the state capitol grounds. So if that poll's correct, I'm in my last term. So
is it making you reconsider?
Absolutely not. I've said over and over again, I'm going to do my job until I lose my job. In my heart, I know this is the right thing.
We're also joined by your fellow state representative, Gary Clary. Can you talk about your thoughts on the day that the massacre took place at Mother Emanuel, at the Emanuel AME Church in Charleston?
Well, I had similar feelings as my colleague Doug Brannon did, just utter disbelief of what has transpired in Charleston. And, we lost a friend and a colleague in Senator Pinckney, and then those 8 other souls that perished that night. And certainly, when I look at my career, a very short one here in the General Assembly, I knew that something had to be done. And I talked to my friend Doug Brannon, and he talked about the political realities of what we're about. But when I ran for election last year, I asked the people in my district to vote for me if they wanted to send a reasonable and sensible person to Columbia. And I believe that the vote that they gave me was resounding, and as a result, I know that I'm doing the right thing, because we need to end this part of our history. And when I say end it, we need to remove this flag from the State House grounds and put it in a proper place. We need to put it in the State Museum, in the Confederate Relic Room, where it justifiably belongs, but not on the front door of the State House grounds. There's a fence around that flag that was moved in 2000, and I think it's very significant that the fence is there. I believe that fences are put up to keep people out, and what we need to be doing here in South Carolina is building bridges and tearing down those fences.
We're also joined by the Reverend Dr. William Barber from Raleigh, North Carolina. Reverend Barber, where were you when you heard that Clem Pinckney, Reverend Pinckney, State Senator Pinckney, and 8 others were killed in this massacre at the church in Charleston?
Well, we were actually in jail. About 10 of us had been arrested in the State House in North Carolina for challenging extremist politicians who have passed the worst voter suppression law in the country. In fact, parts of it were worse than South Carolina. We were arrested for merely speaking up. They told us that we could not exercise our First Amendment right, and we found out about it actually in jail.
Your reaction?
Well, I have a lot of mixed emotions. I've said that the perpetrator has been arrested, but the killer is still at large. And historically, what causes this kind of terroristic violence is when you have racialized political rhetoric and racialized policies, they become the spawning ground, the birthing ground, if you will, for terroristic violence and violent resistance. The flag, for instance, in South Carolina was put up and began to be waved more after the 1954 Brown decision and then in 1962 at the height of the Civil Rights Movement. So the flag was put up as a resistance to policy. Dr. King called it interposition and nullification. It was a sign of that. I'm glad to hear those two representatives say what they've said about this, but I also heard the governor say that we'll always be a part of the soil of South Carolina. Now, soil is something you grow from. Reverend Pinckney, as a colleague in ministry, was not just opposed to the flag. He was opposed to the denial of Medicaid expansion, where now the majority of the states opposing Medicaid expansion are where 6 out of 10 black people live. He was opposed to voter suppression, voter ID in South Carolina. He was opposed to those who have celebrated the ending of the Voting Rights Act or the gutting of Section 4, which means South Carolina is no longer a pre-clearance state. And the very district that he served in is vulnerable right now. He was opposed to the lack of funding for public education. He wanted to see living wages raised. So I would say to my colleagues, let's take down the flag to the governor, but also let's put together an omnibus bill in the name of the 9 martyrs. And all of the things Reverend Pinckney was standing for, if we say we love him and his colleagues, let's put all of those things in one big omnibus bill and pass that and deliver and bring it to the funeral on Friday or Saturday, saying we will expand Medicaid to help not only black people, but poor white Southerners in South Carolina, because it's not just the flag. Lee Atwater talked about the Southern strategy where policy was used as a way to divide us. And if we want harmony, we have to talk about racism, not just in terms of symbol, but in the substance of policies. The flag went up to fight policies. If we're going to bring it down, we're also going to have to change policies, and particularly policies that create disparate impact on black, brown, and poor white people.
Doug Brannon, a state representative from South Carolina, a Republican state representative, your thoughts as you listen to the Reverend William Barber?
We've never met. I would like the opportunity. I am a Republican member. 5 years ago, I fought a bill that would have torn apart public education in South Carolina. I understand that there's much change that needs to take place in the state of South Carolina, but this flag is where we're starting. I'm not willing to spread. We've got focus on the flag, and that's where it needs to stay right now. I respect everything the gentleman said. I can't say I agree with everything he said, but I can tell you that we've got movement here, and I'm going to keep my focus on this issue right now. And when we address this issue properly, we'll move to the next.
Representative Gary Clary, you're dealing with these issues in the legislature. For example, one of the issues that State Senator Clem Pinckney focused on, Medicaid expansion. Your thoughts about this?
Well, you know, Medicaid expansion was something that was debated during the last session of the General Assembly, and our Governor Haley, made the decision that she would not accept federal funds for Medicaid expansion. And you know, certainly I hear what Reverend Barber has had to say, and that is something that is going to have to be examined in the future. I agree with Doug Brannon from the standpoint we're up against the clock right now because our session actually ended on June 4th, and we're operating under a sine-die resolution, and I think that sine-die resolution will probably be there will be an attempt to amend that today to deal with this flag issue, and that is something I agree with Doug that we need to focus on right now, because if we can pay tribute to Senator Pinckney and those other 8 that lost their lives last week, then that would be a major achievement for us in being able to remove the flag from the State House grounds and then start taking the next step insofar as dealing with some of the problems that Reverend Barber expressed.
You know, there is a Confederate monument that was built to be with the flag in front of the state capitol. Is there any discussion, Doug Brannon, of moving that to a museum as well? And is there any discussion of possibly having a monument to the 9 martyrs or to your fellow state representative, actually a state senator, Clementa Pinckney?
I have not heard any comment or mention of removal of the actual Confederate memorial. I would remind everyone that there are several different memorials around the state capitol. It's actually, except for the flag that we're talking about today, the state capitol is a beautiful area with monuments and memorials to many individuals and groups of people. As far as a monument to the 9 who were murdered last Wednesday, I've not heard any mention of a specific memorial for them either, but that, I would suggest, is a wonderful idea.
Well, we're going to break and then come back to this discussion. We are joined by 2 South Carolina state representatives, both Republican, Doug Brannon and Gary Clary. Both say they will support. Doug Brannon says he'll introduce the bill to bring down that flag. Reverend Dr. William Barber is with us from Raleigh, North Carolina. We're going to be speaking with the South Carolina Don Doyle, historian Don Doyle, about the significance of the Confederate flag. And we'll soon be joined by David Goodman, who is the brother of Andrew Goodman. Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, and Mickey Schwerner were 2 civil rights activists who in the early 1960s went to Mississippi to deal with an attack on a church, a black church, a church that was burned down. As they left that church, they ultimately were murdered. And we're going to talk about the significance of this 51st anniversary of their deaths. It was, June 21st, 1964. Stay with us.